What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Once again, bring you another edition of my favorite passion that I've ever had. I've had passions for sports, playing sports, but talking sports is a completely different entity in and of itself. And turning the mic on, hitting that live button is such a rush for me, and I hope you've enjoyed tuning into my podcast as much as I have enjoyed delivering the podcast for you. The last few days, we've had some really awesome guests on the show. Last few weeks, last few months, we've had some amazing guests on the show. Nate Geary, Ty B, Trainwreck Sports, Maniac Zach Sheldon, eventually, soon, Degenerate Al. Kyle Trimble will be joining me as well of BangedUpBills.com. He was a guest on this podcast a few months back, but plenty to talk about as well with the Buffalo Bills in terms of injuries and players that have not been able to stay healthy, players that will not be ready for the opening bell, for the first round bell, for week one in particular. But today's episode, I really want to dedicate it to a main topic that is headlining in the National Football League right now, and that is the holdout of Ezekiel Elliott, my take on it. What does this mean? And this podcast, of course, is presented by yours truly, Ryan Thomas, but TrainwreckSports.com. You will find it on TrainwreckSports.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, as well as Spotify. I really want you guys to subscribe to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on Apple Podcasts. That is the number one home for the podcast as soon as it's out. Apple Podcasts, TrainwreckSports.com, Spotify, and a little bit for everybody, right? For the computer people, the people that still have computers, the people that are so stuck in their ways of having computers, TrainwreckSports.com is the way to go. Spotify.com is the way to go for computer users as well. And for the people that are phone savvy, Apple Podcasts, obviously for Apple people, Spotify, obviously for Android users. And I think that's awesome that the podcast is now available on all of those mainstay platforms. I've really appreciated all the love and support. I've read some really awesome reviews for the podcast that they really took me away. They really did. They took my breath away reading them, and I was really excited to see those positive reviews on there as well. So thank you very much for all the love and support. I greatly appreciate it. But let's get right down to it. The topic of discussion, Ezekiel Elliott holding out. And I touched on this vaguely with Josh Rest when I joined the Trainwreck Sports Fantasy Football Show. Check that out on the Trainwreck Sports Apple Podcast and SoundCloud stations, where we talked about Ezekiel Elliott being a number one overall pick, and any other season, I think it's safe to say that, yeah, Ezekiel Elliott would be that number one overall pick for fantasy football owners. He would be that guy that you could say is the safe bet, the safe pick for you on your fantasy team. But we live in a very interesting world right now. Politically, professionally, sports-wise, there's a lot to talk about. And for as great a superstar as Ezekiel Elliott is, for as important as he is to that Dallas Cowboys team, you ask yourself the question as a sports fan, on the outside looking in, does Ezekiel Elliott deserve the right to ask for more money? And the answer is unequivocally 100% yes. Without Ezekiel Elliott, the Dallas Cowboys are not a playoff team. Without Ezekiel Elliott, the Cowboys might not even finish above 500. With Ezekiel Elliott, they are a playoff team. With Ezekiel Elliott, they are a above 500 squad. And with Ezekiel Elliott, they will win the NFC East. Now, that's a broad statement because you get the Philadelphia Eagles in that division. They're a tough team, but I don't think they are as dominant in certain positions as Dallas is, and I think Dallas knows that the moment of opportunity is right here, right now. You got Dak Prescott really coming into his own. I think he'll have a great year this year. You got Amari Cooper, who really had a great chemistry with Dak Prescott. And you do have Jason Witten back in the fold. You got an offensive line that is pretty good, not as great as it was a few years ago, not as young as it was a few years ago. An offensive line that has had its fair share of injuries these last few years. So when we talk about Ezekiel Elliott and the fact that he wants more money, it's fair. It's justified. Ezekiel Elliott is one of the best players in the entire National Football League. But as a player in the National Football League, you would think that he would realize that the opportunity, the window of opportunity is so small. It is so small. You have only a few years left before you're 30 years old, on the outside looking in, wondering if the team is going to keep you. Hence, LaShawn McCoy. So you have a real scenario here where the guy really does deserve to get paid. He needs to get paid based on the years that he's produced in the league so far, the years that he's played in the league so far, and he deserves to get paid based on what he is going to do for this Dallas Cowboys team. If the Dallas Cowboys win a Super Bowl within the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it will largely be because of Ezekiel Elliott. He is that talented of a runner. He is that great of a running back, that durable of a running back, and a guy that can be that true workhorse back, which are so rare these days. You don't normally see that. I don't think there are many Ezekiel Elliott's out there outside of Saquon Barkley in his own right, and outside of even a Melvin Gordon, who's also asking for more money. So I think the two true workhorses in the National Football League right now are Saquon and Zeke. I don't think that needs to be said. You have your elite of the elites with Christian McCaffrey, with Melvin Gordon, with Alvin Kamara. You got some talent there. You got some guys that can play and play at a really high level, but they're not Ezekiel Elliott. They're just not. And that's okay. You know, understanding that there are, quote unquote, tiers of talent within the National Football League, understanding that, knowing that is a completely different entity. And I definitely know that, and I definitely understand that. But with Ezekiel Elliott, this situation is not fun for, let's just say, the football fan in me. I want to tune in to any game that's on and see the best players on one side against the best players on the other side of the field. That's what I want to see. And Ezekiel Elliott is the example of that. When the Dallas Cowboys are on primetime, I want to know that I'm watching the best players on the Cowboys versus the best players on the Eagles, the Giants, or wherever the Cowboys play on primetime this year. Most likely those teams, because that's always how it goes. But if Ezekiel Elliott's not out there, and you got Alfred Morris out there, I'm not tuning in. As a paying customer to the National Football League, I'm not tuning into it. There's no draw for me there. As great as Dak Prescott is, as talented as Amari Cooper is, neither one of those guys are as good as Ezekiel Elliott. We're talking about the best running back in the National Football League, in my opinion. And knowing that, if I know that, Ezekiel Elliott knows that, the media members know that, so why are we here? What's the holdup? Jerry Jones has got deep pockets. Dallas has some cap space, but you have a triplet of players in Dak, in Ezekiel Elliott, and in Amari Cooper that want some big money. Well, we'll see what happens with that, because I think they're going to be the highest paid triplet, quarterback, running back, wide receiver trio in the National Football League. And does that mean they will produce results? Does that mean that they will go above and beyond and Dallas will win 3 Super Bowls in the next 4 years? No, it does not. It could actually quite mean the opposite, especially if Ezekiel Elliott is going to do what they are saying he is going to do, what he is saying he is going to do. Now, this is where I segue over into the next kind of underlining point. With Le'Veon Bell's entire situation, you had a player that wanted more money, that felt like he deserved more money, that felt like he was the best running back in the National Football League, that felt like that Pittsburgh Steelers offense was nowhere near what it could be without him. And he was wrong. They had a player on that team that took his spot, filled in very nicely. Now, maybe he's not quite Le'Veon Bell. Maybe he's not the elite of the elite. Maybe he's not top 3 or top 2. Maybe he's, somewhere lower than that. top 10, top 5, top 8 in James Conner. But the lone fact that Le'Veon Bell thought that the Steelers needed him, they did not need him. But you bet your ass Dallas needs Ezekiel Elliott. There's a huge difference. The Steelers had a plan B. Dallas does not. Alfred Morris is not a plan B. All due respect to Alfred Morris, I really like Alfred Morris. He's a running back I've owned on my fantasy teams a time or two, but he is not Ezekiel Elliott. He's just not. Out of this triplet, it goes Zeke, Amari, and Dak. As far as how I rank the importance of these players, without Amari Cooper, I don't know if Dak Prescott would have even had a solid season last year. Without Ezekiel Elliott, I don't know if Dak Prescott would have had a solid season at all in his career. Without Amari Cooper, I don't know if Zeke would have done as well. So they all complement each other. But the most important piece of that puzzle, no doubt about it, is Ezekiel Elliott. And if Ezekiel Elliott is threatening to sit out a year, which he is now threatening that he will sit out a season, I don't understand why these guys do this. They take notes from Le'Veon Bell, who was willing to sit out a whole season of his career just to get a deal that really wasn't that great. He got a lot of money, but you wonder, could he got more had he actually had another season to build off of? A 1,500-yard, 500 receiving yard, 800 receiving yard season where he ran for over 2,000 all-purpose yards, which is what Le'Veon Bell can do. You wonder if he would have got paid that much by the New York Jets. He didn't even get paid by the team that he had played for. He tests the market, he gets paid, and the Jets were really the only team that were willing to give him that much money because no team is going to give a player that sits out a year that much money except the New York Jets. Now with Ezekiel Elliott, being that he is the bona fide, in my opinion, best running back in the National Football League, you have teams lining up in droves to get that guy in their uniform. And he will get more than Le'Veon Bell because he's younger and he's better. So in a way, I guess I did just answer my own question there. But the strategy I do not think is business savvy. Because if I'm playing in the National Football League, one, I am looking to get paid. But if I'm playing in the National Football League as a starting running back as the best player on the Dallas Cowboys, knowing what the Dallas Cowboys have around him on this team, knowing that the Super Bowl window is closing, I am going to play. I'm going to swallow my pride and say, hey, I'm playing. I want to go win a Super Bowl, and then I can get paid. And maybe that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and maybe that's why Ezekiel Elliott's playing football, and that's okay. But you get my point. I definitely feel like Ezekiel Elliott is taking a little bit of the wrong stance here, and I think Jerry Jones is playing as nice as he can, playing this, persona up a little bit, putting on a quote-unquote poker face because he has to, due to the fact that these negotiations are ongoing. You don't want to taper off to the left or taper off to... You don't want to let your cards be dealt. You don't want to deal your cards before the cards have been dealt in front of you. You don't want to show your hand, is what I'm trying to say. But Jerry Jones has done that. He said, we don't need a Russian champion to win a Super Bowl. Well, last I checked, you needed Emmitt Smith, and you damn well need Ezekiel Elliott to win a Super Bowl. You're out of your mind. You're not going to win a Super Bowl with Alfred Morris as your running back. You're just not. I'm sorry. For all the people out there that say that the running back position is obsolete, it doesn't matter. You're out of your mind. There's a huge difference between saying that the running back position doesn't matter and saying that, yes, the running back position does matter. It just depends on the skill level of the player that we're talking about or the offense in which we're talking about. You have a quarterback in Dallas and Dak Prescott who's very conservative, does not like to turn the ball over, does not like to throw deep, does not like to take chances, likes to be a quote-unquote game manager, and you have a running back that can withstand up to 30 touches a game for now. And I say for now because we know he's not going to be able to shoulder that load in 4 years. We know that's not going to happen. So just go that route. Why not say that? Why not throw that out there? But you know how valuable Ezekiel Elliott is to this team. Ezekiel Elliott is extremely valuable to the Dallas Cowboys. And the window for the Dallas Cowboys is closing. It is not opening. It is closing. The offensive line is getting older. The offensive line has had injuries. The defense, Sean Lee, is getting hurt. Jason Witten is in the twilight of his career, obviously. He was retired for a season and came back. Sean Lee has had massive injuries over the course of his career. The defense has overachieved these last few years. It's only a matter of time before that defense actually shows that they are less than average, to where the offense is going to have to pick up the slack for the defense. And you want to tell me that Ezekiel Elliott doesn't deserve to get paid? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. Ezekiel Elliott is the one player in the National Football League that I believe does deserve to get paid. For whatever reason, it's not happening. But if Ezekiel Elliott holds out, I think he will regret it. These running backs have a short window of opportunity to really etch themselves into the legendary status of career within the NFL. You look at a player like Frank Gore. He's playing his 15th season, I believe, starting this season with the Buffalo Bills, and he's largely a backup, but a backup that is 522 yards away from passing Barry Sanders as third all-time on the all-time NFL rushing list. I think if I'm a running back and I'm playing in this league, I'm playing to surpass the greats, to win a Super Bowl, surpass the greats, and to become a legend. And I don't see any player becoming a legend that sits out a year of their contract due to a contract negotiation. I don't think that's legendary at all. Do I think it's business smart? Maybe. He'll make more money, and he deserves to make more money. But I don't like seeing guys sit out. I'm not a fan of it. And as a fan, it ruins the entertainment of the game because you want to see the best players on that field playing the best players on that field. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was my take on the entire Ezekiel Elliott holdout situation. Definitely a situation to stay monitored to. Definitely a situation to keep your eyes on as this offseason winds down, especially for your fantasy draft boards. Hey, everybody, join the Thomas Takeover. Join me on Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take, and also follow me on Instagram at Ryan Thomas Take. Also, like the Facebook page, subscribe to Apple Podcasts, to YouTube, follow me on Spotify, and I hope you enjoyed today's shows. Take care, everybody. God bless. Have a great Tuesday.